Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. Nathan Carter had always been a man who craved the stars. As a child, he'd spend hours gazing at the night sky, dreaming of the distant planets he might one day reach. But dreams had a way of slipping through your fingers. A life in space exploration had been Nathan's goal, but after budget cuts and political maneuvering, his program had been scrapped. He never made it beyond the orbit of Earth. Now, years later, he found solace in the most advanced virtual reality game on the market, Beyond the Boundary. It wasn't just a game, not really. In Beyond the Boundary, you could lose yourself for hours to days, even in vast, unexplored galaxies, rich with alien worlds, forgotten civilizations, and the promise of discovery. It was the closest thing to living out his childhood dream of space exploration. The game was more than just a pastime for Nathan, it had become an obsession. The controls, the landscapes, the intricate details of the game universe, it all felt more real to him than anything in his day-to-day life. He sat in his VR rig, adjusting the visor over his eyes and lowering himself into the familiar darkness of the game's startup screen. As the interface flared to life, the stars exploded before him, galaxies swirling in a kaleidoscope of color, and the sensation of weightlessness overcame him. His in-game avatar, lean and athletic, appeared at the helm of a sleek spacecraft, the Atlas, ready to embark on another mission. Nathan's focus was singular. He was heading back to a region of space where, in a previous session, he had stumbled upon something strange. A glitch, maybe, or a new feature the developers hadn't yet disclosed. Either way, it had piqued his interest. The Atlas cut through the simulated void, passing nebulas and asteroid belts with fluid ease. Nathan's fingers danced over the control panel, plotting a course to the uncharted star system that had caught his attention. It had appeared for a brief moment the last time he played, a faint flicker on the edge of the game's map. No other player seemed to notice it. He hadn't been able to shake the feeling that there was something important there, something the game wasn't ready for him to find. As he neared the coordinates, the game's eye assistant chimed in. "Warning. You are entering an unregistered zone. Proceed with caution." Nathan frowned. Unregistered? What the hell does that mean? He wasn't the type to back away from a challenge. He tapped the thrusters and pushed forward, the stars blurring as the Atlas accelerated. The ship's scanners pinged, detecting something ahead. He squinted at the screen. It was a planet, but the readouts were all wrong. No atmosphere, no life. Not even a solid core. It didn't belong to any category the game had introduced. He let out a low whistle. What have we got here? As he descended toward the planet's surface, the game's familiar vibrant colors gave way to something else. An airy, gray fog that wrapped around the ship. The ground was jagged and metallic, stretching out like the ribs of some long-dead beast. There were ruins, remnants of a civilization Nathan had never encountered in all his years playing. Giant monolithic structures, carved with symbols that didn't match any alien language he recognized. Something about it felt wrong. The game's eye piped up again. "Warning, no data available for this location." Nathan's pulse quickened. This wasn't normal. The developers had filled the game with endless lore and boxery for every species, planet, and anomaly. There was always data. Yet here, there was nothing but silence. He disembarked from the ship, his boots hitting the hard metallic ground with a dull thud, and began exploring. As he wandered through the ruins, his mind raced. What if he'd found a secret part of the game, something only a handful of players had discovered? Maybe he was the first. The thought was exhilarating. He ran his fingers along one of the alien monoliths. It was cold to the touch, unnervingly so. His suit should have been reading the temperature, but the HUD displayed only static. Suddenly, his comms crackled to life. "Carter, is that you?" The voice belonged to Zara, his in-game partner and friend. She'd been a coder once, working for one of the big VR companies before she left the industry to play Beyond the Boundary full-time. Nathan smiled as he tapped his comm. "Zara, you won't believe where I am." "I'm seeing your coordinates," she replied, her tone skeptical. But I can't get there. Every time I try to warp in, the game kicks me back to my last save. Nathan's heart raced. It's locked for you? Yeah, and for everyone else I know who's tried to access it. You've stumbled onto something big, haven't you? I think so. He looked up at the towering ruins. I'm in a place the game doesn't recognize. No data, no history. I'm the only one here. That's not good, Zara said slowly. Be careful. Neosphere doesn't like it when players find things they're not supposed to. Nathan chuckled. Since when do we play by the rules? Fair point, she admitted, but there was a note of caution in her voice that he wasn't used to hearing. Just keep me updated. If you find something strange, I want to know. Nathan promised he would, but the truth was, he was already hooked. Something about this place gnawed at him, like a puzzle that refused to be solved. As he continued to explore, he noticed more anomalies. The gravity was inconsistent, as sometimes pulling him down hard, other times leaving him light and weightless. And the fog, it seemed to move of its own accord, curling around him like tendrils. Hours passed, or at least it felt that way. Time was hard to measure in the game. He made his way deeper into the ruins until he reached what appeared to be a central chamber. There, in the middle of the room, was something that made his heart stop. A massive machine, ancient and weathered, but still functional. It emitted a low hum, like the beating of a giant heart. He approached cautiously. Before he could examine it more closely, a window popped up on his screen. Incoming communication from Neosphere. He hesitated for a moment, then accepted the call. The screen filled with the stern face of a Neosphere representative, a man in a sharp suit who looked like he hadn't smiled in years. Mr. Carter, the man began, his voice clipped and formal. We've been monitoring your recent activities in Beyond the Boundary. You've accessed an area of the game that was not meant for public discovery. Nathan crossed his arms, a smirk forming on his lips. So what? Isn't the whole point of the game to explore the unknown? This is different, the man said coldly. We are asking you to cease your exploration of that sector immediately. Failure to comply will result in consequences, both in-game and in the real world. The hairs on Nathan's neck stood up. It wasn't the threat that bothered him, it was the certainty in the man's voice, as if this was no longer just a game. He cut the communication without responding and turned back to the machine. Something told him Neosphere was hiding more than just a few glitches. As he examined the device, he saw strange symbols etched into its surface. He activated his scanner, hoping to translate them, but the scanner spat back only gibberish. Frustrated, Nathan reached out and touched the machine. Instantly, his vision blurred, and a surge of energy coursed through him. The world around him flickered, then stabilized, but something had changed. The game felt different now, and more real, more dangerous. A message flashed across his HUD. You have unlocked the Lost Star system. Proceed with caution. Nathan's hands trembled as he read it. The Lost Star system? He'd never heard of anything like that in the game's lore. He had to tell Zara. Before he could call her, though, the fog began to swirl violently around him. The machine hummed louder, and the ground beneath him started to tremble. His instincts screamed at him to get out, but he couldn't tear himself away. Something was happening. Something big. The next moment, the machine powered down, the fog dissipated, and everything went still. Nathan was left standing in the ruins, alone, but with a nagging feeling that the game had just crossed a boundary it was never supposed to. Nathan stood in the eerie silence that followed, heart pounding in his chest. His eyes scanned the ruins once more, but the sense of impending danger had not faded. The machine, now dormant, loomed large behind him, a hulking reminder that he had stumbled onto something far bigger than a mere glitch in the game. Whatever this was, it had the power to disrupt reality. He needed to move, yet he couldn't afford to linger. He tapped his wrist, opening a calm line to Zara. Zara, I think I've done something big. There was static for a moment, then her voice came through, tense and hurried. Nathan, Where are you? You've been offline for hours. I've been trying to reach you. Offline? Nathan frowned. No, I've been here. The game's been running. I found this machine, Zara. I unlocked something called the Lost Star System. Her gasp on the other end was audible. You what? Nathan, that's not possible. The Lost Star System is a myth. It's a glitch story players tell each other to explain random crashes or corrupted data. It's not real. Nathan's fingers tightened on his console. Well, it's real enough, and Neosphere knows about it. They tried to warn me off. Zara was silent for a long moment, processing his words. This is bad. If Neosphere's involved, they wouldn't just warn you off without a reason. You need to log out. Get out of there, Nathan. Whatever you've found, it's not safe. I can't, he replied, pacing back and forth. His instincts screamed at him to keep moving, to stay ahead of whatever was lurking. If I log out now, I might never get back in. They're watching me, Zara. I need to figure out what's going on. The silence stretched longer this time before Zara finally spoke again. Okay, but if you're staying in, then I'm coming with you. I'll find a way around the lockout. Give me a few minutes. Nathan nodded, even though she couldn't see him. Hurry. I've got a bad feeling about this. He closed the comm line and turned back to the ruins. Whatever Neosphere was hiding, it had to be related to this lost star system. His curiosity burned hotter now, overriding the fear gnawing at the edges of his mind. He had come too far to back down. His instincts had always served him well, and right now, they were telling him that the answers were out there, waiting. The fog began to lift as he walked through the ruins, the metallic landscape stretching out in every direction. In the distance, he could see what looked like a gateway, an archway, tall and imposing, carved with the same strange symbols he'd seen on the machine. It seemed to pulse faintly, like a beacon drawing him in. Without hesitation, Nathan made his way toward it. As he approached, the air around him grew denser, thicker, as though reality itself was bending. His head flickered again, glitching with strange symbols and distorted text. Nathan's fingers hovered over the controls, but he hesitated. The gateway wasn't just an in-game structure, it felt alive. He could sense something emanating from it, a raw energy that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. Without warning, a blast of light shot from the archway, enveloping him in a searing white glow. Nathan instinctively shielded his eyes, but the light was overpowering, blinding. His body felt weightless for a moment, as though he were being pulled through space. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. When the light faded, he was no longer in the ruins. Nathan blinked, disoriented. He stood on the edge of an endless void, stars scattered across the horizon, like glittering jewels against the black canvas of space. But this wasn't the game's typical galaxy. There was no map, no HUD, no familiar markers. He was floating in the lost star system, surrounded by ancient, forgotten stars, the remnants of a civilization long dead. The silence was deafening. Nathan's pulse quickened, his eyes scanning the empty expanse. In the distance, he saw something moving, a slow, deliberate, a massive structure, larger than any ship or station he had ever seen, loomed in the dark. Its design was unlike anything in the game's catalog, ancient and otherworldly, yet oddly familiar. It glowed with a soft, pulsing light, and Nathan knew instinctively that this was the heart of the lost star system. His ship, the Atlas, materialized beside him as if summoned by his thoughts. Nathan climbed aboard, setting a course for the structure. As the ship moved closer, details emerged: massive spires, jagged and broken, with streams of energy coursing through them like veins. The ship's scanners went wild, feeding him streams of indecipherable data. Whatever this was, it wasn't part of the game. It was something else, something more. He docked at a platform that extended from the structure's core. The ship's systems hummed quietly as he disembarked, stepping into the unknown once again. Inside, the structure was vast, its corridors lined with symbols and carvings that seemed to shift and change as he moved. There were no NPCs, no eye to guide him, only the faint hum of energy that reverberated through the walls. Nathan moved cautiously, every sense on high alert. The deeper he went, the more he felt like he was trespassing, like this place wasn't meant for him or anyone. He reached the central chamber, much like the one he had seen in the ruins, but larger, more ominous. In the center of the room stood another machine, identical to the one he had found before, but this one was active. It pulsed with energy, a deep, resonant thrum that shook the floor beneath his feet. As he approached, his comm crackled. "Nathan, it's Zara. I'm in." "Where are you?" "I don't know," he whispered. "This place. It's not part of the game." Zara's voice came through, filled with tension. "I've been looking into Neosphere. They've been experimenting with something, using the game as a cover. They're trying to access something beyond the simulation, something real." Nathan's breath caught. "Real? What do you mean?" "I mean, they've found a way to merge the virtual world with reality. That lost star system, it's not just code. It's a doorway, Nathan, a doorway to something that exists beyond our universe." Nathan's mind reeled. A doorway? He looked at the machine in front of him, the energy radiating from it like a heartbeat. "And what happens if we open that door?" "I don't know," Zara admitted, her voice soft. "But whatever it is, it's dangerous. Neosphere has been keeping it hidden for a reason." Nathan's fingers twitched at his side, his mind racing. He had come here for answers, but now he wasn't sure he wanted them. If Neosphere had been hiding this, it wasn't just a game glitch, it was something far worse. But before he could decide what to do, the machine flared to life, its pulsing rhythm quickening. A voice, low and guttural, filled the chamber. "You have come too far, traveler." Nathan froze, his eyes darting around the room. The voice wasn't coming from his comet, it was coming from the machine. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the fear creeping into his chest. "We are the architects of the boundary you have crossed," the voice replied. "And you are not meant to be here." Nathan's hands clenched into fists. "Then why leave the door open?" The machine's hum deepened, the air growing thick with tension. "The door was not left open. You forced your way through." Nathan glanced around, his mind racing. He had to get out of here. But something told him that leaving wouldn't be as simple as logging out. "What do you want from me?" "To fix the breach," the voice answered, "or suffer the consequences." The machine's energy flared again, and suddenly, the walls around Nathan began to ripple, reality itself distorting as if the virtual world was being torn apart. He stumbled back, panic rising in his chest. "Zara, I need help." "Now," her voice crackled through the comm, frantic. "I'm trying to get you out, but the system's locking me out." "Neosphere's own to us." Nathan's heart pounded as the chamber shook violently, the ground beneath him splitting open. The machine let out a deafening roar, its energy surging toward him. He had one chance. If he could shut it down, maybe just maybe he could stop whatever was happening. He sprinted toward the machine, his hands flying over the controls. The energy crackled around him, threatening to tear him apart, but he didn't stop. With one final push, he slammed his fist onto the main console, triggering a shutdown sequence. The machine screeched, its lights flickering, and then, with a final shudder, it powered down. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, his body trembling from the effort. The chamber was still, the distortion gone, but he knew the danger hadn't passed. Zara's voice came through, breathless with relief. "You did it. I'm pulling you out now. Hang tight." Nathan didn't argue. He closed his eyes as the familiar sensation of the game fading washed over him, the virtual world dissolving into nothingness. When he finally opened his eyes, he was back in his VR rig, the cool air of his apartment hitting his skin. He sat there for a long moment, staring at the screen in front of him, his mind racing. The game was over, but the implications of what he'd discovered were far from it. The lost star system wasn't just a gamma, it was something real, something dangerous. And Neosphere wasn't going to let it go.